Hey now, about 4 minutes ago, it was the Italian Grand Prix. It was fun to watch, and it ended up being a great race. Rob, Brian, we're both here. I am so excited we're doing this right away, as you said, Rob, on the high after the Monza Italian Grand Prix. None of those words made any sense.
Hello, and everyone. Welcome to the Dirty Side of the Track, by the way, America's leading Formula One podcast. Brian's so excited, he didn't even do the intro.
Hey now,
Yeah.
did I do that?
No, you're right. I think you did the hey now, but if not, you just
So-
did. Um, Literally, it is about, what, probably 20 minutes since all the post-podium shutdown of ESPN and Mother's Polish and all that kind of stuff came up. So we decided, why not? Let's just jump straight in with it. It's a long weekend here in the States, so we want to go drinking. But also, just such a great just such a great F1 weekend, to be honest. It was just I know
Feel
we
good.
sound
It
like a
was a
broken
feel
record,
good
but
weekend.
it not just feel good for say the result, but just feel good with the fact that we go into each race weekend now not knowing who's going to win, and that's such again nothing against Max, phenomenal season last year, record setting. But boy, is it better when you have no clue what's about to happen.
I
It's
agree.
just
A lot of people have been
oh
commenting that, this season, 24, might actually be better than 21 when we had that battle for the title because it was just Max and Lewis and there was so much negativity. And I'm not going to say it is yet, but I agree with you. If it wasn't Max and Red Bull, it was Lewis and Mercedes before that. And now to have this, who knows who's going to win, what constructor's going to win, and the fact that it is so close amongst basically four teams at the top, it's awesome.
yeah, absolutely amazing. So before we get into that, for anybody new to the dirty side, finding us for the first time, welcome. Kind of structure's going to be we'll have a bit of news and social to pick the bones out of what we saw happening in the week leading up to the race weekend. Brian will open up his video vault, and then we will go straight into our Monza race review. No preview this week because we don't have another one next week. I think we kind of need to draw breath anyway. So yeah, let's jump into the news and social. So
The first
you
one
want to
is
take the first one?
yeah, of
Oh,
course.
the
If you noticed, Kevin Magnussen, who was once again collecting penalties and trading paint, and Nico Hulkenberg, who was playing bumper cars with every RB he could find, decided that they made the race. So Haas got out of the Netherlands after they were in debtor's prison. So story solved. I will say this: Ural Kali, who was their sponsor, who got their money finally, they were also owed a race car. And so that was my favorite part of the story is we knew Haas owed the former sponsor money, right? And we were tracking that and they had to pay it before they could leave the Netherlands, but they also received the race car owed to them. That's awesome, man. If I ever sponsor an F1 team, I want a race car as part of the deal as well.
yeah. And I think so. I think that kind of we knew that Monday because the story was that I think they'd made the payment over the weekend, so they just had to wait for the European banks to open, and then boom, off we would go. Um, and so, week started at a fairly quiet pace, and then Tuesday, I'm up in Minneapolis for a business trip, and I was doing a presentation. And when I got back to my seat and sat down and let my colleague take over, I just glanced at my phone. At which point, I saw that all notifications on all social media that I have just exploded. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? It literally took me about 3 nanoseconds to open up one of them to work out that Logan Sargeant was no longer a Williams driver. Um, and which probably wasn't shock horror, although we'll get into this in a second. Maybe timing was,
Yeah.
but it was
Yeah.
the replacement that caught a lot of people by surprise. What did you make of it, Brian? Had you ever really ever heard of him?
No, I mean, we've talked about it. We both loosely watch F2 and then maybe the Academy when we have time. And I did not. I mean, I've heard of Franco Colapinto, but I couldn't tell you anything about him except that's his name. If he walked in with a shirt on that said, I'm Franco Colapinto, I'd point at him and go, hey. And then I'd be like, that's all I got. So, uh, I was surprised at the timing more than anything, though. Less the driver. I mean, we talked about this a lot over the summer break. And if you remember when you and I did our predictions for the rest of the silly season, I said Logan would be replaced by Antonelli for the rest of the year. I don't know why they didn't do this over the summer break. And fine, if it's
Yeah.
not Antonelli, if it's Colapinto, if it's not Liam Lawson, if it's not Mick Schumacher, and we'll get into those two in a second. But why do it? I know he crashed, right? I'm not dumb. I know what we joked about the Destructor Championship. I know what was that last straw. But why did they wait for the last straw so long? You could have had 3 weeks for Franco to get ready in the car over summer break, do his simulator work, whatever. Instead, they waited till after the Dutch Grand Prix when Logan crashed. I mean, what do you think?
Well, yeah. So let's go to the destructors. So first off, I don't know which order to do this in because all roads are going to lead back to James Vowles and his inability to probably think before he speaks. But anyway, um, the Destructors Championship at the moment, and this is based on kind of estimation of
Right.
nobody really knows all the costs of all the parts, but on an estimation at the moment, Sergio Perez, this is the one championship that he can lead, and he's at the top with $3.64 million
Shots
worth.
fired.
I know, sorry, Checo. $3.64 million of damage. And number two is Logan with $3 million of damage. Quickly followed by his teammate. So it's not like Alex is a golden boy. He's got 2.4. And then it drops off quite significantly. Fourth is Lance Stroll with 1.4, same as Zhou 1.4, Danny Rick 1.2, Alonso 1.1, K-Mag 1, Esteban 1, and Yuki just under the mill. Now, what was missing from this graphic, which I think is important, is if you added another column alongside that
Points?
and put points scored in the
Mm-hmm.
championship,
Agreed.
you'll find that only Logan and Zhou are appearing on this leaderboard. So the risk reward here is that everyone else on here, even Checo has caused a lot of damage. Why have you brought in a lot of points for Red Bull? And when those points translate into prize money at the end of the season,
Exactly.
probably bought in more than 3.6 that his points will contribute to. So Logan sticks out like a sore thumb of being way up there with no upside.
Yeah.
So I could see, however, to your point, why wait one more race? If this is going to happen, you might have got him in and he wouldn't have done all that damage to the upgraded car because he wouldn't have been there anymore. Everyone said, oh, that's the thing. That's a straw that breaks the camel's back. And leading back to James Vowles, he came out and even if it wasn't the real reason, it seemed a credible story. Let the media run with it. But he comes out and goes, oh, no, that absolutely wasn't the reason. That had nothing to do with it, thinking that was going to quash everything. So, of course, all the journalists come back and go, well, what was the reason then? And then he kind of goldfishes. It's like, I'm with you.
He's reached the limit of what he's able to achieve, and in fact, it's almost unfair on him continuing that, is what he said about Logan. Dang! And then later, and this one's taken out of context. Okay, so I will give the preface. This wasn't meant exactly the way this is taken, but he did say it. Mick isn't special. He would just be good. I think he would come with a lot more experience than Franco does, but the future of Williams isn't investing in the past. Dang! And so, like, again, I know there was some context to it, and so we're removing that. And it's
there was
quote.
massive context, and the journalists went all in on just clipping out the bit that made
I know,
it
but you still don't say those words even in context of other things.
And then he came out and did a big interview on the grid yesterday or this morning. Was it yesterday before quali? He came out and apologized for his choice of wording, that he's gone and spoken to Mick about it. Essentially, when they were asking him, why didn't you pick Mick? He made reference to taking gambles on Hamilton and Verstappen or Senna. He made reference to young drivers that were obviously going to be special.
Right.
And why you would take a gamble on them. And then almost then rolled into, but Mick isn't special, meaning he didn't see him as Senna Hamilton category. But why use that word?
I know that was so bad.
So I love James Vowles, but he's had a few of these now where he's just too open and honest. He needs media training, I think.
So with Logan going out mid-season and Coca-Cola Pinto Beans coming in for him at this point, we look back and there have been some other fairly recent mid-season replacements. Obviously, Nick DeVries last year for Danny Rick. And in terms of real seats, we're not talking injury replacements because then Danny Rick for Liam. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about actual seat changes. I forgot Mazepin was taken out mid-season for Magnussen 22. That's wrong, isn't it? I thought Magnussen started the season. And then Haas renewal. I know you grabbed this somewhere. I don't remember that. I thought Magnussen, didn't they call him in? And he joined a training and he was so excited in the car and testing and the car was fast. Anyway. But we do remember when Pierre took over for Alex, and then obviously there were other ones along the way. I'm not sure about that Mazepin one that you found, but whatever.
Poor old Danny Kvyat is on here twice.
I know.
Within successive seasons, being dropped for Verstappen and then being dropped for Gasly.
The hard part is the Verstappen one, right? Because now his kid and his ex-partner are hanging out with Max too. Max is like, I'll take that as well, thanks. But anyway, we had some birthdays this week. Valtteri turned 35 on Wednesday. Carlos today turned 30. Happy birthday to both of those gentlemen. In case anyone is new, and since I already butchered the beginning, I might as well
This is Valtteri Bottas, and you're listening to the dirty side of the track.
not forget telling you about that from a little bit ago.
What else do we have? Renault staff about to go on strike because they're all getting worried that Alpine are going to go to just being a customer rather than a full-on constructor. Yeah, I don't know. I think we stay away from Alpine now until actually some real kind of new. It's all over the map at the moment
It
with
is.
kind of will they, won't they? Will they stay? Will they just be a customer engine? Are they just lighting a fire in Renault to make a better engine? I mean, who knows what's going on over there? It's. I think it was in either one of the practices or quali. They were talking about it and they said it's the worst. It's almost anti-marketing if you persist as the Alpine kind of Renault brand, but buy a Mercedes engine. Because Alpine being, you're basically saying to the world, buy our cars. Our engines suck because we buy them elsewhere. It's
It is definitely different than like when Alfa Romeo sponsored Sauber and they just put their name on their car, or back in the day when Red Bull had Aston Martin stickers on the car, even though they obviously didn't have an Aston Martin engine. Totally get it. But with that, shall we open the video vault?
yeah, go for it.
All right, man. I was also traveling this week. You were in Minneapolis, and I was all over the Midwest with things, and I didn't get home till late. So I thought I was going to have an empty vault. I was actually quite nervous. But not only do I not have an empty vault, I even went on a deep dive late Friday night. And so I deliver some good stuff here. First off, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri play What Takes Pole on the Salesforce channel. That's right, folks. I have found the Salesforce channel now. It's 6 minutes long. You can skip this one. So feel free to skip it. It's not needed to watch. I, as always, do the work you don't want to do for you. And so I went out and I watched Salesforce channel. However, spoiler alert, if you don't want to hear this, fast forward 5 to 10 seconds. Oscar's favorite music is house music. And so he starts talking how he likes bass and the kind of whole aspect. And he even says, it doesn't match my personality. And I get a lot of heat for that, I know. That was my favorite part of the thing. I learned that and like, oh, that surprised me too. And he answers everyone's questions. Yeah, that didn't seem like that matched. Last time I'll highlight this one, the track tours with Valtteri. This was the Monza one on the Sauber channel, 5 minutes. I like this one. I like all of these insights he has as Lewis goes by on his scooter and waves and Valtteri passes him back on the bike. They're laughing at each other. And then the long arms, Valtteri comes back at the end, especially so. But he gives you insights on the corners. And one of the stories that we'll get to in a second was some of the reprofiling of the curbs. We'll talk about that in the race section. But he even highlighted those things Valtteri did on his track tour. I thought it was great. So, but I can't do this every week before every race. Just know I'll be watching long arm Valtteri, and you should be too. And then again, I know this is on the Formula One channel, kind of mainstream vanilla. It's the Grill the Grid. Who Am I challenge? 12 and a half minutes long. I really like these things because it's like fun to watch the drivers, put on the spot and ask questions. There was a question in there about a former driver who was an aerospace engineer before a driver. And I said, ooh, we did a Veil's Tales on Nigel Mansell. And so I knew that one right away. And if you haven't listened to our Veil's Tales about Nigel Mansell, you can find all of them at dirtysideofthetrack.com, special episodes. So check those out. That was great. And my last one, and we don't always highlight this, even though I think we both watched, Lollipop Man had the Dutch Grand Prix review. It was good. I enjoyed it. I'm not saying it was his greatest one ever, but the Max to Lando transition of the domination playbook was excellent. So if you enjoy Lollipop Man, it's definitely worth a watch. Rob, any ones you saw, watch, or want to add?
No, you can close the vault and we can crack on.
Let's do it, because I've drank about 7 Cokes this morning to watch that race, and so I am wired.
So, practice. And this is going to be interesting, right? Because I would say practice and quali maybe didn't allude to what we ended up seeing to some degree, but we'll get there. So I just wrote kind of my synopsis of FP 123 at a high level was quali battle looks like being close between McLaren, Mercedes, and Ferrari. Not sure Red Bull are going to figure. Will Max. That was kind of what I put. And then there were some other little bits and pieces in there. There was and you put these in there. There was the funny little moment for old Maylander.
Safety car crash. I didn't get to watch practice. I was working on a Friday, and so I saw the feed come across of the safety car going in hot into. I think it was. I don't want to say it's
Parabolica, wasn't it?
Was it Parabolica?
Yeah, I think so.
Can't remember where, but
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
you see it going off and sliding, and you're like, oh, that's not how that's supposed to work. And there were a lot of good memes. My favorite being Crofty going, red flag, safety car. Hang on a second, safety car deployed. How can you? What do you do there? And then the picture though of them dragging it out of the gravel, all dented and dinged and broken. Not a good look for Aston Martin, but. Then the Antonelli crashes in FP1 as well at the same place in his 4 minutes in the car. That you could see George's face watching his chassis being dragged out of the crash, and he's like, "Yeah, great, thanks. I'm happy they used my car for that." Could you I'm
Yeah.
like? Could you imagine if a test like someone borrows your car basically and just crashes the crap out of it?
I know, and I'm going to risk having old man syndrome here. I can already
Oh
feel it
God!
coming on, and I'm
Oh
probably
boy!
talking about back in my day. But there was a lot of outpouring of this is going to ruin Antonelli's career. It's too soon for him to be in a Mercedes. He needs to be nurtured and looked after and take longer to be brought into the sport and blah 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 blah
Which
blah
they
blah.
could have done at Williams this
Which they
year,
could have
but
done at Williams, right?
yep.
However, there's also this saying of if you're good enough, you're old enough. And there are multiple occasions down history where somebody's been plucked from the lower levels, sometimes even bypassed Formula 2 and dropped into a Formula 1 seat. And it's the top 20 drivers in the world. It's sink or swim. So if people think he's good enough, put him in a car and let him prove it. And if he isn't good enough, well, he's not good enough. So I'm not a big fan of this hold them back and nurture them and da 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 da. There might not be a seat for him in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years time. The chips might not land that way. All the seats might get nailed down. So there's an open seat Mercedes now. Mercedes have watched him enough to believe in him. Throw him in the seat. If he's good enough, he'll make that car work. And if he's not, well, guess what? The F1 machine will drop him out again. I feel sorry for him, but there's plenty of motorsport series out there that he can go and race in. The same's going to happen to Logan. Maybe he turns into a Mick and hangs around as a reserve driver. But I don't know. It's too soon for him. I think if it really is too soon, then you're not going to pull the wool over the eyes of any F1 boss. They're not going to throw you in a car just for giggles, right? You've shown something to earn a seat. I don't know. What's your thought? Am I being old man Rob there? And
No. No, I mean, I think you're standing on a big box of nothing. Who cares? Like, who cares really? I mean, I'm with you. I don't think you need to run someone up the ladder to get there. Just drop them in, see what they can do. But I mean, this is such a high class first world 2 team problem at this point that we've seen. So like, whatever.
yeah, okay.
The other thing that I thought was a big nothing burger as well, where the drivers were all pissed about the curb reprofiling around Monza, and not so much that they did it, is that they weren't told about it or consulted on it, which I find interesting. But of course, they're all part of the Grand Prix Drivers Association, and they were apparently heavy on WhatsApp this week saying, why have they reprofiled the curbs and actually shrunk down the size of most curbs, especially so on the Ascari chicane, where you used to not be able to ride those curbs, so it was quite a challenge, and now they're just flying over them. And so they thought it was taking away some of that challenge. I'm not a driver. We can ask Valtteri next time he's on, or next time we get Carlos, or maybe we can get Franco on. Maybe his media demand isn't that high, and the Williams people will finally answer my question again, and we can get him on. But my point is, how often do you think they're consulted on track changes like that? All the time? Like if
Yeah,
someone
I,
does,
I would
yeah,
I would honestly the way this story came up and they reacted to it so badly, I can only guess they normally are all the
must be,
time.
yeah.
That they come to them and say, "We're going to do this to the circuit. What do you guys think of?" And then that gives them the opportunity to go, "Are you nuts? That's going to make this so unsafe. We're not going to race on that track if you do that to it." So I imagine they are consulted all the time. So to rock up to Monza and have somebody, probably Valtteri Longarm on his cycling around the track, go, "Do those curbs look lower to you guys, or is it just because I'm on a bike?" And I
They
can
came out here with
imagine.
a grinder and just took them all down. Yeah.
So yeah, I can actually see why probably they are annoyed because any change to a racetrack will affect all the drivers. So I don't think you can just go sneaking a change in. And can you imagine arriving at Parabolica and then find out it doesn't turn right anymore?
It's a 90-degree corner.
They change it to a hairpin. You're getting ready to slingshot yourself down to the main straight, and suddenly it's a hairpin.
The only place they could have done that was Paul Ricard. Since it's all just concrete anyway, they could have just repainted it overnight, come out like new track every day. Oh man! So then we go to quali, and so you know what? I'll be honest. I enjoyed quali. We learned a little bit, but not a lot until the end, and it was kind of anticlimactic at the end of Q3 when the last runs didn't really make anything any better or faster. So the first runs in Q3 mattered, but in Q1 we lost the two Saubers of Joe and Valtteri, the Williams of Colapinto, and then Lance and Yuki. Also out in Q1. So again, I don't think any of those were big surprises. Maybe Lance, but Aston Martin hasn't been fast. And
No.
Fernando said after the last race that the seventh fastest car, and no one disagreed with him. So
Yeah. I mean, I wrote at the bottom of this, no super huge shocks for me. Could probably have predicted the Q1 and Q2 exits, and Q3, the kind of the cars that we thought were fast were fast. I mean, I enjoyed it, but it was probably the first time for a while, one of the more predictable qualifying, like you say. So in Q2, we lost Alonso, Danny Rick, K-Mag, Gasly, and Ocon. And, you know, the way the Alpines have been going, they tend to be kind of maybe getting one into Q3 and maybe one drop out. So no big surprise there. Alonso was a little unlucky. He lost out by less than the blink of an eye, I think, to Hulkenberg. I mean, it was super close, but that would have been more than they could have hoped for, I think, getting into Q3. Yeah, so
the
Q3,
top four teams all made it into the top 8 in Q1 with Lando on pole. We'll come back to that. Lando on pole from Oscar and then George. And then the two cars who snuck in now that Aston Martin's no longer the fifth best team, and those two spots are open in Q3, as you already said, were Hulkenberg and Alex Albon. Making that Williams look fast. So that was pretty cool. I liked Albon kept popping in early laps and going up to like fourth on the board. I'm like, yeah, Alex, this is fun. And then, of course, you know, as people progressed. But yeah, no huge shocks. Norris on pole, though, which set us up for the race. And there was a lot of debate amongst Rob and I, and Mr. Reed joined in a bit on what would happen at the first corner. And Rob and Vale and I this morning were trading a lot of WhatsApps about what we were kind of expecting. And both of us expected something to happen at the first corner, and we were wrong. The difference being, it was the fourth corner instead when we saw some.
Yeah, but that was a good overtake. We were expecting carnage, right? We thought we were going to lose. Like, me and you, our biggest concern was somebody gets too feisty into corner one and we lose one or two or three of those front 5 or 6 cars, because we were both looking forward to those guys duking it out and having a good race. So we were like, oh, please let's not lose anything stupid. Like George gets all excitable because he makes a good start. He knows that Lando's probably going to make... Yeah.
But he just cost himself.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
How many times did we see George locking up or going in too hot into turn one? I felt like every other lap.
Did he just think that the curb on the left-hand side approaching the first chicane was so low that he couldn't tell the difference between curb and grass? Because he kept dipping out on the...
He did. He kept going for overtakes that were just too crazy and having to bail out at the end. I don't know what George was doing. He was on fire. Ran a good race except for corner one, basically.
Yeah, no, and to your point about corner 4. So McLaren get away. Lando, for the first time since dinosaurs roamed the earth, gives a good start and holds the start into the first corner. So he's got to be feeling brilliant at this point, because like, yes, nailed it. I got away from the line. Piastri did a superb job as his wingman and cut off George coming down the outside. Nothing wrong in that move. Perfectly fair. Kind of, I'm taking this race in line. You've got to get out of it.
He was ahead of him. It was fine.
Yeah. So, round the first couple of corners, McLaren 1-2. This is now just going to be a papaya masterclass as they just use Piastri to hold everybody up, and Lando disappears off into the sunset and wins the race. Great. See you next week, guys.
Except we get to the Rajios chicane, and Lando, I think, was having the exact thought you just said, except it took him the Curva Grande and up to the chicane to get through this process. Like, oh, I held on. This is good. We're going to do this. Oscar cut off George. This is looking good. And by the time he's on the second part of that thought, he looks over in his mirror and goes, oh, crap. And Oscar's around him at this point. And you can see Lando. Like, I watched it again a couple times. You could see him starting to turn after this first part into the second part of the chicane, and Oscar's there. And he has to back out quickly, and you see his car slide. Yep. And at this point, he loses far too much pace. And Charles is like, oh, thank you. I'll take that. And pops through as well. Now Lando's in third. And I'm like, oh, my God. I mean, it's wild to me how this is unfolding that George goes back on the first corner. Lando is thrown off his game by his teammate and loses a couple spots. And Lando once again won't finish the first lap in first when he starts on pole again.
Yeah. I mean, I've got to be honest. I love Oscar. He's like the silent assassin. He's so unassuming. He's such a kind of an introverted character, but he's having none of this. I need to yield to Lando because he's chasing Max. I think maybe if Lando was in striking distance of Max, of it's in single digit or low double digit points, I think maybe he does help his teammate.
Yeah.
But right now, where it needs like all the chips to fall Lando's way, and
Yeah,
Max
like
is
62
DNF
points behind.
Yeah.
Max.
I think Oscar is like, do you know what? Next year could be an absolute barnstormer of a season with all this convergence and everybody catching him, go maybe beyond Red Bull. I might have a crack at the Drivers' Championship next year, so I'm going to put in some performances to remind everybody that I don't think I'm just necessarily the number 2 around here, because I think Oscar will take it to Lando anytime he's given the chance. And that was such an opportunistic strike where Lando, yeah, like you say, got away out of the first couple of corners, was looking okay but in good shape, but left the door open and was so naive to think that Oscar wouldn't walk through it.
We've talked about this for a while now, and I started off, I think, where you're joining me, which is Lando struggling on the first lap. And at first you told me it was a lot of bad luck, and I said, no.
Oh, no. Just 1 second. On the starts, forget once he's got away from the line.
Okay.
Lando's been overtaken a number of times. I mean, it was when he was just bogging down and just not getting off the line. I'm like, what the hell's that about? And then getting squeezed out when he had screwed the pooch. But I'm starting to lean towards Oscar. Can I say it out loud?
Yeah.
Oscar being the better driver?
No way.
Ooh,
Seriously?
I don't know. Okay, answer me this then. Lewis and Valtteri, or Lewis and Rosberg, are going into that corner together. Does Lewis leave the door open to let either of those teammates through at that corner?
Not in a million years.
Schumacher and Barrichello?
Not a chance. Not unless he's asking him to pass. That door is closed.
Max and Checo?
No, Max would just run Checo off the course.
So, I don't know. There's just little things. I don't know. Maybe they're just really, really well balanced. And on some tracks, Oscar is the better driver, and on some tracks, and maybe that's to the detriment of a World Drivers' Championship assault. But actually, for the constructors, is going to play out beautifully for them. At this point, I imagine McLaren don't care which one wins if they're getting 2 on the podium each week.
Exactly. Well, anyway. That was awesome. We looked also at the start. It looked like Carlos and Lewis touched, at least wheels. Nothing came of it. And then Hulkenberg, as I joked earlier, played ping pong with the RBs. First, Danny Rick ran him off the track, and then the next lap he said, "Yeah," and maybe he didn't see the number and thought it was another Visa Cash App RB, whatever they're called this week. And he's like, "Oh, that's the same guy who ran me off. I'm gonna run right into his side pod, bang!" And just took Yuki out of the race. He had to retire shortly after that, and then Hulk needed a new front wing, and his race was hosed by that point. So. Otherwise, though, it was a fairly clean first handful of laps where we saw Oscar, Charles, Lando, Carlos, Lewis, Max, George, Checo, Alex, and Fernando. So again, effectively not too dissimilar from the starting grid, with the exception of George falling back and Lando losing the first spot there that we already talked about. And then we kind of get into what I was fearing was tire management mode. And because a lot of people were trying to figure out, is this a one-stopper or is this a two-stopper? And it seemed like everyone was going two-stopper at this point.
Yeah. I mean, and just before we get onto that, the stewards had a little. They got active and they threw Danny 5 seconds for squeezing off the Hulk, and then Hulk got 10, I think, for his torpedo maneuver. So Hulk came out worse of the whole thing, to be honest.
Well, did he though? Because Danny Rick didn't serve his penalty right. So
in terms of
the penalty, he did.
Yeah.
But in terms of the long-term approach, his front right wheel guy touched the wing, and forget about that one. Then you still have to serve the first 5, and they give you another 5 on top for screwing up the first 5. So then you serve 10. But the problem is you already served 4.98 of the first one incorrectly, and then the next 10. So it's really a 15-second penalty that Danny Rick ended up getting. So I felt bad for him. But again, the dude just touched the wing and then pulled his hands back like, no, I'm not supposed to do that.
No, I didn't mean to do that. No one saw it. I think I got away with it.
There aren't 14 cameras on me.
Yeah. So then lap 13, we started to see what we've seen happen quite a few times, where Lando, if he does get overtaken by someone, seems to fall back for a little while, hold station, and then is able to go back on the attack again. And suddenly he's reeling Charles in. He gets into his DRS Looks like he's going to get him. At this point, like you say, everyone's probably thinking it's a two-stopper, so they let Piastri get way clear. I think you noted the remark they made on TV again about that McLaren looks awesome in clean air. So
They
they
love
kind of
that comment
decided
for that
that,
car.
they do. So I think they knew that they weren't going to screw Oscar by bringing Lando in first and undercutting him because he got such a delta. He wasn't going to get caught on that one lap, and it all looked like it had kind of played out perfectly. I mean, other than the fact that Lando decided he didn't like the pit lane sign and decided to run into it.
That was hilarious. He comes flying in, locks up his tire, slides sideways, hits the board. Let's hope there was no. I mean, we didn't see him refer to the stewards, and that's a pretty easy thing to know. So I don't think he would have gotten a penalty. We would have heard. I would have assumed, even though we're recording right away. And then, really, quite honestly, the only real thing of note until we started figuring out that people were kind of doing different tire strategies shortly was papaya rules, where they get on the radio, and once again, McLaren has a dodgy team radio. Last week, Lando, who do you think we're racing? Cars? Max? I mean, I don't understand what the question was. And now this week, Lando, papaya rules. What? What the hell are we talking about here? Oh my God. They have their own set of rules and they named them after the color of the car. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably because that's for them and not for us, right?
But
So
I mean,
we're probably not.
yeah, we could infer what it means. We could talk about supporting each other, racing each other cleanly, and if you have to, defend for someone against someone, could be any of those things. But I mean, I don't know. I think we're getting a little. I think McLaren's
And,
taking it a little too far.
yeah, maybe. I think they just want to avoid Hungary again, and if they have to go if the pendulum has to swing the opposite way for a while, just to kind of really stamp that,
True.
I
Good
think it
point.
makes sense. But at this point, Charles had already pitted. He'd reacted.
On
The undercut
16.
happened, and
Yep.
he was upset about that. We made a thing of, well, will they split strategy? How far can science go? Apparently, one lap further because in he came once we'd written that in the notes. So really looked like McLaren and Ferrari were matching each other and were covering off each other, and it was a two-stop for both of them. Is Max going to make a one-stopper to try and make up for the pace deficit? He puts another set of hards on, so that's a guaranteed
And
two-stopper.
it was a slow stop too.
Oh man!
Did you see him banging on his steering wheel after he left the pits? I mean, it was like a 5-year-old out there. Like, it took an extra 2 seconds, and he's just banging on his wheel.
Did he turn into Toto Wolff during that?
Yeah, that's my Max impression. Was that not good? And then we cut back to the track at this point, and we see Kevin Magnussen taking a page out of the Nico Hulkenberg playbook for the Haas team, and just running right into Pierre Gasly. Slides right into him, came in hotter than blazes, locks up his tires, and like bang, well done, K-Mag, welcome back. He had a lot of good overtakes today. That wasn't one of them. And the thing that's interesting, he got a 10-second penalty for that, same as Nico. And so 10-second penalties often in the past come with penalty points. Not always. Like, they review it after the race. But I think Magnussen's on 10. So
He's getting close.
I think so. It could be wrong. But if there's a real chance Kevin Magnussen will be on vacation for Baku. So I guess we'll see. Stay tuned. Maybe they'll put Mick back in the Haas just to make everyone all confused.
So at this point, the only thing I was kind of seeing that was surprising me from what everything FP123 and Quali had shown us was that we were probably looking at McLaren Mercedes fight with Ferrari maybe hoping to split the McLarens, and then we thought Red Bull would probably come in behind that. So at this point, it was all looking like that, other than you probably had to flip Mercedes and Ferrari in that equation, because all of Mercedes' promise and looking good on the longer runs in practice and being pretty decent in quali was all pointing to Merck carrying on their recent run of kind of having decent race pace. Ferrari weren't showing any of this in earlier. It looked like, and me being the cynic, because I don't like to get my hopes up for Ferrari, is that they'd done what they did last time round, where they'd put all the upgrades in place to maybe hopefully get a pole, and they could celebrate that in front of the Tifosi, and then maybe amble round and come in fourth or fifth and try and say, yeah, but we got pole, guys. So I'm looking at this and I'm starting to try not to get too excited and going, Ferrari are kind of in with a shout here of podium, I thought, at this point, because I thought they're still, if they're both two stopping, they're not going to match the McLaren, but they seem comfortably ahead of Mercedes, and I don't see Red Bull coming back through.
Agreed. And I had two other things going in my mind at this point. This is all about lap 26, 30, somewhere in there, when we're having these conversations, 25, let's say. And so I was curious, will any one of the front runners not do a two-stopper? And so I'm
Yeah,
getting
you called it.
curious.
You did, yeah.
I was, well, because George has me on heightened alert after he did this Silverstone, right? Is that right? Where he did it? Where he won? No, Spa. My bad, Spa. And
Spa.
so it was Spa. And so now I'm on high alert for people who are like, everyone's two-stopping. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go long on these tires. And so I was sure someone was going to do it. I didn't know who, though, because at this point, McLaren had pitted. And I've said this a lot. They get faster as the race goes on. And not just like everybody does because they have less fuel relative to other cars. It seems like their car comes alive more under lower fuel and is usually gentler on their tires. Usually, not always. And so I'm thinking maybe it's McLaren. I wasn't sure it would be Ferrari. Didn't know. That was my guess. All weekend I'd been excited about Charles in our WhatsApp chat. I only said podium. I'll be honest. I said podium, but I kept saying Charles
and on the midweek. On your midweek prediction, you put him third, so you did, and I didn't have Ferrari feature, and I think we both had the same front two. I think I went Lando, Oscar, Max. I thought he would maybe sneak onto the podium, and you went Lando, Oscar, Charles. I think so. Credit to you.
Yeah.
You saw Ferrari putting.
I didn't. That was heart overhead. That was me just because I love Charles. You know, I'm a big Charles
Giving
fan.
you the credit here, man.
I don't know. I'm being honest. But so I thought he might podium, and I was so excited to see him in that position. But I was curious. So like you said, Merc not as fast as we thought. I'm curious about the pit stops. It was kind of an interesting race, right? While we didn't have nonstop battles throughout the whole field, we did have overtakes. The DRS felt like it was right. You got right into the braking zone. People kept, like George, kept effing it up. People kept sliding into other people. I thought it was fun to watch. And so at this point, we're watching Colapinto take the gas man. All of a sudden, Lando has his own little situation where he has to go ahead.
Well, I was going to say I put this on here on purpose because saw a little bit of conversation online of people saying, "Oh, Colapinto didn't get any coverage in this race, and when Behrman was in there, they couldn't stop talking about him. It's British bias." Okay, maybe it is, but also Behrman was up in the points and was putting that Ferrari and was constantly on the TV cameras because he was there. Colapinto, do you know what? Did absolutely nothing wrong this weekend. He had a great race, and I'm actually glad they cut to him when he was going to come up and make his first overtake in Formula One. And they said, we're about to see the first overtake by Colapinto in Formula One as he's going to get Gasly. And I thought, well, actually, fair play to the race directors we didn't get a little picture-in-picture of it. I think we went on board with Colapinto as he swept past the gas man. So kudos to him. He did a good
he finished 12th. He finished 12th. He didn't seem to put a foot wrong. Now, I didn't watch his whole onboard the whole race. He finished ahead of Danny Rick, and he didn't get lapped. So, Alex finished 9th. And Colapinto 12th. I think that's a fairly good opening weekend on short notice for a guy.
Yeah, what was he plus? If Alex was plus 1 minute and 7 and Colapinto 1:21, like 14 seconds behind his teammate, which I think is probably better than Logan was doing behind
I agree.
Alex.
And it's first race. Now, again, Monza, I'm not going to say we've never seen this before. This is where De Vries made his name a couple years ago. For Williams, in the Williams, finished 9th, couldn't move his head. His neck was so sore. So anyway, back at it, we see, Lando pits on 33, and the conspiracy theorist in me put my tinfoil hat on. I said, oh, my God, are they going to undercut Oscar again? And Rob's like, no, calm down. And they didn't. But then I did write, will Ferrari go one stopping? And I thought it'd be Carlos because he had the last stop. So at this point, I'm thinking split strategy. Pit Charles relatively soon, now that the leaders have pitted, and leave Carlos out and see what happens. Just see if you can do it, is what I thought would happen. I was totally wrong because they left both cars out, but we could kind of see it coming at this point, and even the announcers were getting pretty into it.
I was going to say, about lap 37, it was really starting to become, Ferrari might be leaning into this, but it was still a little bit of a ways off, but yeah. And then Lando was catching Max, and I didn't like this bit of radio. Now, I was going to say I've calmed down since. It literally is not that long ago that it happened. But
right.
Lando comes up to the back of Max. Max goes on team radio and says, do I race him? Meaning, Lando, do I try and prevent him from coming past me? Now, and they instantly came back and said yes. And I'm like, that felt a little petty to me at the time because Max isn't actually racing Lando today. They're going to be miles apart come the end of the race. So, I understand making it difficult for him and not just letting him breeze by, because he wants Lando to maybe lose as many points as possible. But if you really go out of your way to race him and then even further screw Max's race and he drops back and George catches him, then that felt a little petty. Maybe, I'm not sure. Maybe it's a nothing burger, but I just didn't like the way it.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, I think it's a bit of a nothing burger. He didn't do anything crazy. You know,
Oh, he didn't get a chance. He didn't get a chance because he breezed by him on.
Yeah, it took him a lap, but agreed. And you're right. They weren't racing each other, but I thought it was a big nothing. And then Oscar pits on 39, right? And so he came out
just before that. We had Checo getting naughty on George.
Yeah,
George had tried a couple of times to get past him and had messed it up, and he bailed
Checo
out
really
at the
cut in
chicane.
front of him.
Yeah. That was, but nothing more came. Not that I've seen. Yeah, I didn't even see the thing coming up as being under investigation. So maybe they decided it was the one move under brake and you're allowed. It just felt if it was, that was probably the latest moment you're allowed to make it. Let's give Checo some credit, maybe.
And then Oscar pits. He did come out just in front of Lando with, I forget who was in between them at this point, like an Alpine or something. But anyway, point is, everyone's pitted except the Ferraris. And I look at the thing and I write back, it's lap 40 of 53. They're 18 seconds from Charles to Oscar with Carlos in between. 18 seconds, 13 laps. That's a lot with a car in between. Like, why would you not stay out at this point? It's a no-brainer unless you expect that tire to explode.
Unless you're worried that you're going to hit the cliff and you're literally going to go from surrendering 1.5 seconds a lap to the McLarens to suddenly it being 3 or 4 because you just can't turn into those two chicanes. I mean,
but give it a shot. You're just going to drop past the McLarens, which you'd do anyway if you pitted.
Well, this is the way the chips fell. I think we have to take a pause here and just acknowledge Ferrari once for actually calling this brilliantly. They've looked at this, I think, and seen if they go for it and it doesn't work and suddenly they're losing grip all over the place. As long as it doesn't happen the moment they've gone past the pit lane entry, they can pretty much bail and just and take a pit stop, both of them, and still they had a pit stop in hand. They still come out ahead of Hamilton. So at worst, they're going to finish like 3rd and 4th and let the McLarens go through. At best, they get a 1-2, and maybe that doesn't come off and they get caught. So I just say kudos for Ferrari to rolling the dice there and trusting that Charles can be the tyre whisperer needed to be slower than Oscar, but not to the extent where he gets gobbled up.
And interestingly, it means we can't use this sound in the context it was given.
Wait, what are these tires?
Sorry, it's a mistake.
So we don't have any of those Ferrari situations. No rainbow wig, clown faces on the Ferrari pit wall. I agree. And you were freaking out at this point.
Yeah, I wrote it here. Rob refusing to believe in a Ferrari. Can't even speak. Refusing to believe a Ferrari 1-2 is on the cards. Squash those feelings and bury them deep down. Because the more laps ticked by, and the fact that Oscar was quicker, but not hammer enough. Time Lewis when we've seen him on an absolute charge and like peeling off 3-4 seconds a lap. This wasn't in the zone of catching them, although it was in the zone of catching Carlo, and the 1-2 was quickly toast. And we had Oscar gobble him up, and I think a few laps later, Lando got him as well. Yep. So he did the best he could in those. He probably played rear gunner well. I'm not sure how much he held Oscar up, really. I mean, Oscar put a great... Fair play to Oscar, and this is where I'm going to start leaning towards Oscar was the better driver today, maybe. Let's not call it all the time, but today over Lando.
Thank you for that. That was... You can walk that back a little. That's good.
Because... Oscar put a superb overtake in on Carlo as they were going down the back straight where there's no DRS.
Yes, he did.
No DRS. He got into his slipstream, got past him, brilliant. When Lando came into exactly the same position, I know they said, Carlo's probably been warned and charged the battery differently or blah, 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 blah. But he didn't even look close to being able to make the move there. So he had to wait until the main straight and use DRS.
Right.
Now, when you're on the charge and trying to catch someone, you clear the car in front half a lap before the other guy, you're going to easily make the difference.
You know what, Vale? Sometimes you make some good points, and that's one of them. I want to highlight this. I want to highlight the fact that I think that's a great point. It was Oscar who came out of the Lesmos right behind Carlos and was able to take him on the back straight because he kept so close. You're totally right. And we didn't see a ton of overtakes there, so it really had to be something where you got it right coming out of that corner, and you had your battery charged and you were ready to go, and Oscar did a great job doing that. And then, like you say, at this point, we are now watching Charles being hunted down by the McLarens at home. And
Sorry, okay.
I'm just sitting there. I'm actually at this point I'm standing up, fearing a
Yeah.
Lewis Hamilton tire delamination at Silverstone situation where you see the car
100%.
flopping on the tire. Can he make it to the end? And I got Willie T. Ribs in my ear, like
Charles Chuck Leclerc.
like, can Chuck do it? Can he hang on? And I'm thinking, I even wrote in the notes, apparently Charles is only going to win the emotional races this year. Just his home Grand Prix Monaco, crying in his helmet, and then comes through and wins in Monza in front of the Tifosi, shouting things in Italian I couldn't understand. The radio couldn't even pick up. It sounded like he was even tearing up a little at times in the helmet.
Every time they showed the front of that car and him coming into a braking zone for those last 3 laps, I was just waiting for the telltale lock-up, plume of blue smoke. He goes straight on and evacuates through one of the chicanes, and that gives Oscar the gain that he needed. But he didn't. I mean, he slowed down a lot. He got caught quite a lot in the last couple of laps because he was catching him at like 1.2 or something, which was nowhere near enough. But I think over the last lap and a half, he probably took like 4 out of him because they were in the same shot together. But Charles played a blinder. He knew exactly what he needed to do to get those tyres across the line. And it's the ultimate combination, I would say, of when a brilliant strategy is executed perfectly by a driver. You know, sometimes we talk about cars finishing higher up than they should because it was a great strategy call. Other times we talk about a driver bringing a car home to a position it didn't deserve. Today was both of those two things together. Yeah. Brilliant strategy call, perfectly executed.
And
Mamma mia.
It was amazing. And I just got to add one thing. When you talk about the strategy, it's not always the going into the race strategy. It's the how you pivot when other people are doing things and you read the data strategy. So I agree with you. I just want to say it's not like they built it last night, a playbook, and then executed it. No, what they did was they watched everyone else pit. They watched their tires. They did the math, and they figured, you know what, let's give this a shot. Because like you said earlier, worst case scenario, we're 3rd or 4th anyway. So why don't we just see if we can stick it out there on track? And Carlos got eaten up. Stop inventing. He ended up 4th, but Charles was able to hang on, and he really drove the heck out of that car. And like you say as well, every upgrade they brought, this mattered, and winning at home was awesome. And I was excited, emotional. I watched this thing, and then we get, the interviews, and Lando was very businesslike. He wasn't rude, he wasn't mean about Oscar's thing, but he said, yeah, he did that, and that's what happened. And then Oscar was his usual, hard on himself, quiet, studious answers. I thought Nico Rosberg fell asleep during the last long Oscar response at one point, and then we moved on to Charles, and the place went nuts. But the cool-down room was my favorite because no one talked. It was a little bit of Charles and Oscar, but Lando said nothing. And when they showed the turn 4, lap 1 overtake, you could have heard a pin drop. It was quieter than a mouse peeing on cotton. It was crazy. Like the cool-down room was silent because no one knew what to say. That swung the race so much. It was wild. But then the podium happens, and it was just amazing. I still am on a high after watching that race.
And for all the McLaren fans out there, I got a soft spot for McLaren as well. But this hit me that definition of progress for McLaren was summed up in the cool-down room, or the post-race interview, the cool-down room and the podium. Because if you'd have gone back in time 18 months and said to Zach Brown and both drivers, you were going to get 2nd and 3rd on the podium in Monza, and you're both going to look utterly pissed off that you're so disappointed. You both look like the weekend couldn't have gone any worse for you. You would not have believed it 18 months ago. They would have been doing cartwheels if you'd have told them that car could be up and getting podiums. So it's just, they're going to go and dust themselves off and think about what might have been. This probably should have been a 1-2 rather than a 2-3, but it was still a 2-3. They still took a big nibble out of.
They got it. They're 8 points behind them now, I think. They've gone to 438 plays 446, and Ferrari have gone and kind of put themselves a little bit back in the equation as well, kind of getting some decent points over Red Bull. So, I think they'll be all right. Once the dust settles on this weekend, they've actually had a really good weekend. Maybe they'll feel there were some points left on the table, but 2nd and 3rd, come on, guys. Let's talk about the king of the pits and the pits. And I think we're going to be aligned on the king, but we'll just do it to check because sometimes we aren't. I gave it to the gas man last week, and you were curious, but then you realized. Sorry, just to go back to last week, I gave it to the gas man, right? And you laughed at me on this here pokey little podcast. And you made fun of me picking Pierre. Not a little bit, just a little bit. You thought I'd fallen on my head or something. And then you sent me a text which read,
My son gave Gasman driver of the day as well, but that's okay. I don't put any stock in my son's opinion of F1, which means that
You got people in your own house smarter than you, and they agree with me.
should we just count down after three?
Yeah,
'Cause we're
3,
probably
2, 1, Charles.
Chuck. Oh, Charles. Yeah.
Oh, you want the Chuck Leclerc sound effect again? Yeah.
Charles Chuck Leclerc.
So I think we both agree on that.
What I will say, I did look down the listing. I kind of took your sort of curveball Gasman from last week and kind of looked down. I thought, okay, let's just not go for the really obvious Charles wins it. Maybe we should give King of the Pits to the Ferrari strategy team. Maybe it's a shared award. But I was looking down and going, right, is there anybody else I can legitimately give? Do I give Colapinto for 12th in his debut race? That's too much of a stretch on a day when Charles has done what he's done. There was nothing else really. Nothing else really kind of leapt out of me as saying that's even a contender. So easy one for Charles, I think.
I agree. And so now let's talk about the pits themselves.
You're the pits.
It's a hard one. Like I'm in here trying to figure out who I would give this to this week. I'm similarly like I'm looking through the roster. And yes, I'm stalling to buy myself time. I'm looking through the way everyone finished. I'm like really struggling, honestly. I don't think you can give it to McLaren. I mean,
No.
Mercedes weren't as fast as we thought, but I don't like George.
I don't think that puts them into you're the pits territory.
Yeah, I agree.
Sergio was 20 seconds behind Max again, but that's the run of the mill. He didn't really do anything wrong. So I'm going down the list. I'll tell you where I ended up.
I
ended up at either maybe Hulkenberg.
Yes.
Kind of almost took himself out of the race. Yeah, okay. I mean, his reaction to keep on the road when Danny squeezed him was brilliant. But then if it was hot-headedness that led to Torpedo and Yuki, I don't know. But then I looked down a couple of places further, and it kind of strayed off my radar. But I'm looking at this, and I'm seeing that Fernando Alonso finished 11th, and I think, depending on how far behind K-Mag, once you had K-Mag's penalty, will Fernando get up into the points, or is this final now?
That's with the time added.
Is that okay? That's with the time added.
So Fernando missed a point by about 2/10.
Yeah, almost dragged that kind of not great car into the points. And we've all said the biggest delta is you look at teammates. I didn't realize that Stroll had dropped so far. I'd made a note that when they both came out, him and Colapinto came out roughly within a couple of laps of each other, and actually Stroll had the fresher tyres by 2 laps, if that really matters too much. He couldn't catch a debutant. And then he fell off my radar. He went into witness protection. But 19th, man, last of the finishers.
Yeah.
And in Aston Martin, when we've said that Sauber sucks and can't get anywhere, the Alpines are terrible, and Haas kind of a little bit hot and cold, although they have got a Ferrari engine and Ferrari didn't do bad. So I think I've got to go Lance Stroll, despite the fact he didn't feature on my radar at all.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know why he finished 19th. For all we know, he had a problem. Like, again, we were recording this right after. If he had no issues and finished 19th, I'd agree. But I'm going to give it to Hulkenberg because he started in the top 10 and finished 17. And his teammate showed the Haas points are possible when Magnussen finishes 10th. So
true. That's a fair shout.
And Hulk is better than that. We know that. He's he's a talented driver, and he often has good qualities and then falls back a little in that car that is not kind to its tires. But K-Mag finished 10th with a 10-second penalty. So I give it to the Hulk. You can give it to a Hulk/Stroll. That's fine and good. But someone who knows a lot more than us, who was at the race, is Pitlane Paul. And so we're going to hear from Paul. He sent his review again kind of as the race ended. So thank you, Paul. We appreciate that. But first, it's time to introduce the man. All right. It is a relatively short one that neither Rob nor I have heard. Here is Pitlane Paul.
Hey, no. Well, again, it's just a good time to record. It's like a lap from the end, but even better at the moment because it looks like we could have a Ferrari win. They've actually made this work really well. Look, it's a special place, Monza, and even more special when Ferrari are doing well. So I imagine he's got this in the bag. I mean, Oscar's, he's catching him, but not too much, really. So, yeah, the race weekend, it's been so hot, humid, sticky, nasty. And that's just the restaurants because it's just so hot. You go for a pizza and actually you sweat, more than the pizza does. It's grim. But it's been fantastic. It's been stunning. It's actually been a really good race weekend. I've actually quite enjoyed it. Last European, really happy to have got this one out of the way. But again, performance-wise, yeah, look, okay, a little bit, there's progress. I said P16 for us, so it looks like we could be P16. But on the whole, yeah, I mean, was it a great race? I think it's good how it's finished with the one stop, a bit of jeopardy, a bit of fun. Down from there, really, I don't think McLaren have made a mistake with this. I really don't. I think they've, they are on the right strategy. It just hasn't worked out. Surprised at the drop-off of Max. I mean, bearing in mind, as we currently sit, he's probably 20, he's nearly 30 seconds off the lead again. Perez, again, we sounds like we bully him, we don't, but P8 of the 8 cars, 12 seconds off the back of Russell. Apart from that, it was, Magnussen's done a great job, points for him, points for Albon. Hey, there we go. I ain't got a lot more to say about this race, to be honest with you, apart from I'm glad Europe's done, glad to get the hell out of here, and as we, in fact, what I might do, I wonder if I can walk outside. No, I can't, it's too late, you wouldn't hear it. I was going to walk outside, see if we could hear the crowd. Yeah, you can hear a bit going on in hospitality. It's pretty special, but, oh, God, it's going to be a party around here tonight. I'm glad I'm going home.
Thank you, Paul.
Thought Paul was a party animal, but look, why would you want to get out of Monza on a night where Chuck has won? I would have thought it would have been a great time. But,
I think I would want to get out of there too, because I'm guessing it's just going to be chaos. That's awesome, Paul. Thank you. Yeah, good race. And as he says, done with Europe. We have a week off next week, and then we have Baku. 2 notes on that. It's the races, I believe, on the 15th of September. I may have my date off slightly, which is the day after Rob's birthday when he turns 73. And so we're very excited for that. We'll be watching that, after the celebrations here at the Dirty Side offices for Rob's birthday. But also, interestingly, it's 6 a.m. Central. I just noticed that. That's a fun one for me. I can't wait to wake up at 5:45 to get my contacts in, brush my teeth, get my Cheetos, and show up in front of the TV at 6 a.m.
Yeah, and more than that, we will either need to do a very... I'm going to need you to either get up and watch it live, and we do a very quick recording like we have today, or it might well be you need to find a co-host, because that afternoon I fly to Nashville for a conference. So, yeah, it's going to be fun times. But looking forward to that race. I'm looking forward to Nashville as well, actually. But yeah, just to kind of, I guess, close out the week by just looking back over this now. We kind of did it at the beginning. So going into Baku, we've got Red Bull at the top on 446, McLaren second on 438, Ferrari third on 407. So we're less than 40 points from Ferrari to Red Bull. It will be interesting. Do you think there's any way in this world that Red Bull finished third in the constructors this year? That's not a huge amount of points, right? It's 30-something.
It is not. The problem is, I mean, there's 8 races left?
Yeah.
So it's possible. It is definitely possible. If Red Bull can't stop this backward slide relative to other teams. I'm not saying they're taking a backward slide. I'm saying other teams are passing them in terms of upgrades. Yeah, I think it's a real possibility. We joked a couple weeks ago. We said we couldn't believe we debated whether McLaren would pass Red Bull in the constructors, and now we've moved beyond that. Assume it's done, and that the question is, will Ferrari? And the same thing, though. I think the real question is Lando on Max, because there's only 8 races left, and it's 62 points or something like that now.
It needed to almost be perfection from him, and obviously he's left a chunk of points on the table today. So yeah, I don't see that one happening. I still see it being Max. Just on the Red Bull one, we had a lot of good conversation. Me, you, Rob Reed, kind of the WhatsApp was alive all over the weekend, and it's kind of. And then I saw a post from friend of the show, Break F1, Blake, who came on the show eons ago, and also from Engine Mode 11, that was his partner in crime at Red Bull back in the day. And both of them mentioned we're starting to see the impact of the wind tunnel penalty now. It's really starting to bite, because, and it kind of goes into my own personal theory, which is go back to the start of these regs. Red Bull obviously nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. And the two big challenges, McLaren and Ferrari and Mercedes, kind of all came out with cars that maybe didn't nail things. In fact, we know Mercedes is zero put side pods. McLaren confessed their design had gone in the, what was it, wrong direction.
Wrong direction, yeah.
So then, because of the cost cap era, you can't just spend your way out of trouble and put all of those rights wrong. No, wrong's right. So they've had to incrementally creep back into contention, whereas Red Bull can spend their cash just perfecting what they had. So I kind of honestly believe that, cars have performance ceilings, and Red Bull probably were almost within the nth degree of theirs, hence the ridiculous season last year. But now they can't. A, they haven't got as many places to go. B, they haven't got the wind tunnel time to do it. And then maybe C, they've got the toxicity going on, which is seeing people like Nui and lots of other people leave. So maybe they haven't got the team to react to it. I know we've got 8 races left of this one, but Brian, I'm so excited for next year.
Yeah,
Just
me too.
think, oh my God. Now, do you concur? Do you see any? There's lots of tinfoil hat stuff going on that at some point earlier on in the season, Red Bull got exposed for cheating and had to take something off their car, and that's where they've fallen back. But to me, that undermines the credit that the other teams need for actually upgrading and developing their cars to catch and maybe surpass.
I recognize that people don't listen to every episode, and we have new listeners who join all the time. But I've been saying this forever. Of course I agree. We had this debate a year ago, you and I, and we said, will anyone touch Red Bull in the constructor? Will it even be close by the end of 26? And you said no. And I said
I thought
yes.
they'd win all the constructors before the regs changed.
Right.
Yep.
And I said yes. I thought there would be this convergence near the top. And I didn't think it'd be 4 teams. I did not. I thought somebody would get it right and start coming after them. But that's what happens. And I love the idea of the cost cap. And I said it would take time, right? Because the people who had overspent by $1 billion every year, their advantage needed to be kind of evened out. And the wind tunnel, not just the penalty for catering gate. Why can't I name the cost cap situation they had? But the budget gate. What's the name of it? It had a name.
I don't know. Did it have a name?
Yeah, I can't remember.
Okay,
but anyway,
it's fine.
So that, but more importantly, the fact that the lower teams, not just they don't get as much money, but they get more wind tunnel time. To your point, there are disadvantages to finishing first, and what happens with that wind tunnel reduction is the lower teams can use more time to get their upgrades right, to use it throughout the season, and it'll take time for it to settle in. So I'm actually curious, as we change the regs in 26, with a cost cap that's been in effect for a while, what'll happen there? And yes, you're right. Some teams will get it right again, and some teams will get it wrong, and it'll take some time, and then we'll get back towards, I'm assuming. But I don't think it'll be as bad, because we went into these regs with no cost cap. So I think there was more time to develop.
Yeah, maybe. I hope you're right, because that's the only aspect of the cost cap that is maybe an unintended downside, which is that if you go in the wrong direction development-wise,
right,
you are locked in, and we might get a couple of years of if a team... Now, hopefully we get lucky and say 2 teams nail it straight out the gate. And we don't get the variety that we're seeing right now with like so many different constructors able to go for a race win. But even if we could just get 2, I think we were a little unfortunate that only Red Bull nailed this set so early on. And that kind of locked us into a couple of years of not so good racing. But I am loving where F1 is right now. It's just brilliant. I would never have called a Ferrari win this weekend. Never. Why would you bet against McLaren the streak they're on? But what did they say? 3 different constructors in the last 3 races, and none of them have been Red Bull.
Yeah. It's wild. And I mean, we are looking at just a great finish for the season and what could be an epic 2025. So yeah, I'm with you. I love seeing this, and it'll be fun. And I agree for all the reasons you said. You said it better than I, but I will say I've been saying it a while. The cost cap era, the wind tunnel aspects, and the fact that you can't spend your way out of problems anymore for Mercedes or Red Bull or whomever. It's given us some good racing. And I love watching Max get angry. Max is a great driver. He is clearly one of the best of all time. And he's driving that car around there 15, 20 seconds ahead of Checo every race. And just in that car fuming because he remembers what it was like to dominate. And it's like you had young Max in 21 and before where he had his elbows sharp and he was always cutting people off and because I want to show you I can do it. And now you have I've done it Max, and he's angry because he remembers what it was like to dominate, and he's PO'd that he's got to drag this bucket of bolts around the track. And when things aren't perfect, he's even more angry, but a different version. It's not the I'm proving myself. It's the I know how good I can be. And so it's fun. I love watching this. I love watching this as a whole. It's fantastic. And as a Charles fan, boy, this was great.
Agree. So do you want to do your normal thing and close us out and then play the music?
Let's do it. And since it's not coming off my birthday weekend, we won't have the V10 sound effect to play us out. So Rob's OCD can return to normal levels and we'll get the soundtrack. Everyone, this was an amazing race. Yes, maybe there were times where it hit a little bit of a low, but if you didn't feel good watching this thing, well, then listen to our pod again because we loved it. Thanks again for listening to The Dirty Side. We will be back in 1 week's time. Be well, be safe, everybody.